Tales of Herding Gods, Episode 3. A voice containing strong qi echoed throughout the area. Even though the voice came from afar, it felt as if it were right beside them, causing Qin Mu's ears to buzz and vibrate. He looked in the direction that the voice had come from and saw a few figures standing atop a cliff of a mountain about 2 miles away. Qin Mu couldn't see any of their faces clearly, but knew that they probably weren't ordinary people since one of them was able to project his voice across such a distance. Devil? Who's a devil? I'm just an ordinary person by the river, and this little elk is just a calf that I'm raising. Granny C slung her basket on her arm and smiled. Then she whispered, Moor, run. The urgency in Granny C's voice startled Qin Mu. He tried to say something but couldn't. He didn't want to leave because he was worried that Granny might be in danger. You're just an ordinary person by the river? Projecting your voice to us so clearly and with such strong qi? No ordinary old woman could do that. An old yet vibrant voice echoed from the cliff, then laughed coldly. There's no way that we, the Li River's 5 elders, could be mistaken about the heavenly devil creation technique, a skill that's constantly changing, stripping the skin to make clothing. You still want to explain when we've clearly seen such a sinister skill? You must have frequently transformed humans into livestock using the heavenly devil creation technique, then dragged them to the market for slaughter, huh? Another elder on the cliff solemnly shouted. Many of the seniors of our righteous sect have even been transformed into livestock and forced to graze on grass for eternity. Having seen your methods, there's no way you could trick us. An elk is also a living being. For you to use its skin and soul to create such an evil thing, another elder said in a sorrowful voice. God knows how many more innocent lives will be lost if we don't kill you here and now. Who else should we kill if not you? Granny C spun around to Qin Mu and removed the needle in between his brows, softly saying, These old blokes aren't a threat. However, if you stay by Granny's side, Granny will be distracted trying to protect you. So run quickly. Run back to the village. Qin Mu no longer hesitated and turned back to flee, following the path of the river beside them. He originally thought that it would be awkward to move after turning into an elk, but after he started running, he realized that he had been wrong. Rather than feeling awkward, he felt as if he had always been an elk and ran faster than ever before. The little devil is trying to escape. Won't it be disastrous if we let you escape? Li River's 5 disciples, it's time for your training. Your target is that elk below us. Eliminate him and bring me his head. At the same time, voices belonging to both girls and boys crisply sounded off. Understood. In a flash, 5 figures jumped off the cliff and ran down its side. Swift as a speeding horse, they reached the bottom of the cliff in an instant. At the bottom of the cliff was a deep pool that served as the stopping point of a raging waterfall that flowed down the mountain. Instead of hitting the water with a splash, however, the 5 of them lightly stepped onto the surface of the water and started running after Qin Mu. Granny C's heart sank. Spirit bodies and the levels of their spirit embryo divine treasures definitely aren't weak. Muer's speed can't contend with theirs. They'll definitely catch up to him. Just as Granny Sai was about to move to stop them, 4 figures came flying through the sky and landed around her. Only one person remained atop the cliff of the mountain. He stood there proudly, clearly not coming down anytime soon. What are Li River's 5 elders doing here in the Great Ruins? Granny C rolled her eyes and snickered as 4 of the elders surrounded her. Considering how dangerous the Great Ruins are, aren't you scared that your famous selves might die here? Of the 4 elders around her, the one with the black beard coldly replied, We heard that some filthy disgraces were hiding in the Great Ruins. Demons and devils that couldn't live outside and came here for refuge. Therefore we, the 5 elders, brought our disciples here to subdue them. It still ain't confirmed who's the devil or the demon, or who'll be subduing who. Granny Sai held her basket in the crook of one arm and brandished her pair of scissors in her free hand. Looking as if she had bad eyesight, she chuckled. I haven't exercised these old bones for quite some time. Lucky for me, my abilities haven't completely wilted. Could it be that you geezers want me to turn you into clothing? How dare you be so arrogant, you demon? Are you even qualified to be arrogant in front of us? 4 of Li River's 5 elders shouted. They sprang into motion, staggering their strikes as they attacked Granny Sai. At the very same moment, Qin Mu, who was desperately running toward disabled elderly village, saw flashes of lightning. Pure white bolts of lightning lit up the area, bathing the foothills and the entire mountain in light several times brighter than the sun. Following the flashes of light, a thunderous rumbling washed over him from behind. Qin Mu turned back for a brief moment to look, but only saw waves of wind exploding outward from Granny C's location. The sudden storm lifted the earth, rocks, and even boulders that weighed thousands of pounds, throwing them outward at extremely high speeds. "Granny will be fine," Qin Mu said despite his sinking heart, continuing on his way. Suddenly, the sound of wet footsteps rang out from the river beside him. He looked over and saw a young boy and girl dashing across the water. Both were rushing across the surface of the river, yet their bodies didn't sink into the water. The speed at which their feet hit the water, moving up and down, was extremely fast, much faster than Qin Mu could sprint. Before the river's water could even splash against the soles of their feet, the boy and the girl had already moved on, vanishing like the wind. These two have already reached the level of riding the waves that Grandpa Cripple said I'm currently unable to reach. They're much stronger than me. The two of them soon surpassed Qin Mu while running across the center of the river. Once they did, they angled themselves so they moved toward the riverbank as they ran, clearly planning to intercept him from the front. Qin Mu glanced behind him and saw another person on his tail. To his left, another two people were passing between the mountain ridges, their figures leaping up from the dense forest from time to time to run through the treetops. However, they couldn't keep that up for very long and had returned to the ground to catch their breath. In spite of that, they too quickly surpassed Qin Mu and rushed ahead of him. "I can't let them cut me off. I need to get ahead of them and reach the village. I need to get Grandpa Ma and the rest to save Granny." Gritting his teeth, Qin Mu avoided the riverbank and dashed into the forest. He definitely would have been caught if he continued to run along the bank of the river. The two people at the center of the river were way too fast. The two dashing through the forest were slightly slower, so going into the forest was his only option. "Little devil, you and that elk-murdering she-devil can forget about escaping." As Qin Mu dashed into the forest, one of the two boys in that area sped up and passed the other. However, he was still a step too late and allowed Qin Mu and his elk form to gallop past him. "Don't worry, he won't escape." The pair in the lead, the boy and girl who had run atop the river, wore indifferent expressions. With a flip of her sleeves, the girl laughed gently, suddenly increasing her speed and leaping through the treetops as if she were flying. The boy, on the other hand, calmly commanded the other three to chase Qin Mu and outflank him. Regardless of how much Qin Mu frantically sprinted, he couldn't shake the five people on his tail. In addition to that, he was forced to run farther and farther away from disabled elderly village, venturing deep into the great ruins. Having lived in disabled elderly village for 14 to 15 years, the farthest he had ever gone from the village was only 3 or 4 miles. Now that he had gone way past that, the surroundings started to become more and more unfamiliar. At the same time, it became progressively desolate without a path in sight. As Qin Mu continued running, a valley came into view up ahead. Amidst the peach blossom trees that populated the valley, he could see a herd of elks. He quickly dashed over to them and blended in. Whoosh! A sweet scent swept through the area as the girl landed on the ground, her sleeves fluttering. Looking at the herd of elks before her, she frowned. "Where's the devil brat, senior sister?" One of the youths who was around Qin Mu's age asked as they landed one by one. The girl pouted her lips and said, "He has blended into this elk herd." "Then let's slaughter all of these elks." The youths rushed into the elk herd, brandishing swords and knives as they mercilessly slaughtered the elks. Even though the elks were fast, they were still slower than the youths. All 5 of them possessed spirit bodies and were decently strong, full-fledged martial arts practitioners. The elks fled in every direction, but it was still impossible for them to escape the bloodbath. Soon enough, the elks were being slaughtered one by one. Suddenly, a human voice resounded from the chaotic herd of elks. "Didn't you say that elks were also living beings?" he asked. "Granny killed a single elk, but all of you are slaughtering an entire herd. Why do you claim that we're the ones following the path of the devil?" "Over there!" The girl's eyes sparkled as she gathered her ki and brandished her longsword. Chi of the white tiger spread from her to the longsword, and it radiated a brilliant gold. The sword flew from her hand and shot towards Qin Mu, who was galloping alongside the elk herd. Qin Mu twisted, changing directions to dodge the incoming sword, but it unexpectedly mirrored the change in direction and continued flying towards him. "What kind of technique is this?" Confusion filled Qin Mu's mind. Could it be a divine art? It doesn't look like it. Grandpa Butcher said that a divine art can only be achieved when one's martial path has been cultivated to the extreme. This girl's martial path is significantly inferior to Grandpa Butcher's. As the sword went in for the kill, Qin Mu changed directions while sticking as close to the ground as possible, barely dodging the attack. The instant he dodged the attack, he caught a glimpse of a fine thread attached to the handle of the sword. One end of the thread was connected to the sword, while the other end of the thread was in the girl's hand. This thread was as fine as silk, making it especially difficult to notice. Could she be using this fine thread to control the sword? But considering how thin the thread is, how can she make the sword change direction? Before he could think about the wondrous thread any further, Qin Mu immediately sprinted away. A moment later, the sword shot past him, stabbing deeply into the trunk of a huge tree with a dull thud. As if the sword were alive, it twitched in the tree trunk, yet couldn't pull itself out. Soon enough, the girl floated over and grabbed onto the treasure sword's hilt, pulling it out in exasperation. My white tiger vital chi still isn't strong enough to control my sword, as if it were an extension of my body. Junior Sister Qing, it's already remarkable that you're able to shape your vital chi into a thread and use it to control your sword for battle. The boy who had ran across the river's waves with the girl arrived at her side and gave her a gentle smile. Your experience is lacking, not your cultivation. This is why our masters have brought us to the great ruins, to train and improve upon our shortcomings. In the past, all we cared about was cultivating, so we lack actual combat experience. This little devil is our chance to participate in actual combat. You'll be able to perfectly control your sword with your chi right away. The other three youths caught up with the pair, and one of them smiled and said, "The little devil turned into an elk. Since elk are very nimble, he was able to dodge Senior Sister's flying sword." Senior Sister Qing regained her spirit and continued to direct her sword to stab at Qin Mu. She gave a lovely laugh and said, "Senior Brother Q, don't attack for now. Leave this little devil for me to train my sword control on." Senior Brother Q was the young boy who had ran across the river with her. He nodded at her words and said, "Come, Junior Brothers, let us admire the sword skills of Junior Sister Qing." Questions swirled within Qin Mu's heart as he struggled as he dodged the sword chasing him from behind. Controlling a sword with Qi, could it be that the thread in the girl's hand is her vital Qi and not an actual length of thread? Vital Qi can be used to control a treasure sword to that extent? Will I be able to do that? When he learned to use a pig slaughtering knife, Butcher only taught Qin Mu how to use both his hands to control the knife. Butcher never taught him how to use Qi to control the knife, so he knew nothing in that regard. Seeing that female practitioner controlling her sword with her Qi, an idea formed in Qin Mu's. Since Qi could be used to control a sword, could his vital Qi be used to control other things? However, he didn't have time to ponder that question. That Senior Sister Qing continued to control her sword and have it pursue Qin Mu. In addition to that, since Granny C had turned him into an elk, he found his limbs to be inconvenient. Even the vital Qi in his body had become dormant and did not respond like it usually did. Qi! The sword flashed as it struck from behind, grazing Qin Mu's back. He felt a chill run down his back, which was soon followed by the burning sensation of pain. He could tell that Senior Sister Qing had managed to wound his back. This is bad. An elk might be fast, but it's still slower than someone with an actual spirit body. If I get injured again, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to escape as an elk. As soon as he finished that thought, he felt his mouth suddenly start to split apart. Yet it wasn't actually his mouth splitting apart, but the elk skin starting to peel away from his body, starting with the mouth. Qin Mu immediately recalled the moment that Granny C had urged him to run. At that time, she had secretly removed a needle that had been protruding from the space between his eyebrows. It was the very needle that had pierced his heaven soul. Soon enough, his head had separated from the elk skin. The sword sliced through the air, slashing toward Qin Mai in an attempt to take his life. Qin Mu leaped forward with all the strength he could muster and freed himself from the elk skin, tumbling several yards ahead before getting to his feet and running. Behind him, the sword controlled by Senior Sister Qing cut the elk skin to pieces. Its movements were light like a falling petal and as fast as lightning. Pursuing Qin Mu and trying to kill him had apparently improved her sword skill tremendously. Getting free from the elk skin had momentarily delayed Qin Mu's escape, resulting in one of the youths traversing the treetops to land in front of him. cutting off his escape route. Both of them were only about 10 yards away from each other. With this distance, they would run into each other in the very next instant. Qin Mu didn't have the time to change directions. So without thinking, he subconsciously utilized the leg technique that Cripple taught him. Seeming to stumble forward, Qin Mu moved forward by clawing at the ground with his hands in place of his feet. His legs, which were now in the air, twisted along with the rest of his body, increasing in speed until they resembled a whirlwind. Like a spinning top, he sped toward the youth in front of him. The youth, who was older than Qin Mu by a few years, smiled at him derisively. He raised both of his arms to block, and they radiated a murky green glow as dragon scales began to appear on his skin. "Green dragon's arms!" the youth cried. In the next instant, Qin Mu's legs collided with the youth's arms. A metal clank rang out twice, and before the smile could even be wiped from the youth's face, he grunted and lost his balance. Qin Mu's onslaught forced him back. The youth's sleeves were torn to shreds, remnants of the cloth fluttering around like paper butterflies. Dragon claw tattoos could be seen on the skin of both his arms. The claws coiled around them in a lifelike manner, and it was clear that the scales had come from those claws. However, both arms had become red and swollen after taking Qin Mu's legs head-on. "You hid iron weights on your legs?" the youth exclaimed, both furious and astonished. Both of his arms trembled with pain. His gaze then landed on Qin Mu's feet. "Even your shoes are made of iron?" Qin Mu got back to his feet and hurried away. Yet the youth's words reminded him that he still had 2 iron weights strapped to his legs. Since Qin Mu was learning leg techniques, Cripple had requested that he wear iron weights all the time and made him promise to never remove them. As Cripple kept track of his progress, seeing that Qin Mu's body became sturdier and his strength grew over time, the one-legged man saw to it that the iron weights strapped to Qin Mu's calves got heavier and heavier. In addition to that, Cripple also had Mute the blacksmith forge a pair of iron boots for Qin Mu, further increasing the weight. That pair of thick-soled iron boots weighed 5 kilograms altogether, while each iron weight weighed 10 kilograms. A total weight of 25 kilograms was strapped to Qin Mu's legs. Cripple had asked Qin Mu to train until he could no longer feel the burden of the iron weights and boots. Only after that was he allowed to take them off. Qin Mu had only recently gotten used to them, so he hadn't remembered that he was wearing them as he was frantically escaping. However, if he tried to remove them now, he'd definitely be caught. There was no way that he could afford to stop moving. "Trample on Mount Meru!" As Qin Mu ran, he suddenly gathered strength into his right leg and used the skill. Trample on Mount Meru. The thick sole of his iron boot splattered like mud, shattering the entire boot into flying debris. At the same time, his calf muscles flexed and expanded, bursting out of the iron weight and shooting its remnants into the trees as if they were sharp arrows. Qin Mu stepped forward with his other leg, shattering the other iron boot and weight as his foot landed. Whoosh! Suddenly leaping into the air, Qin Mu felt extremely light. He easily reached a branch at the top of a tree, which frightened him greatly. High up in the tree, barefoot, Qin Mu's weight caused the branch to dip slightly. Sword lights flashed from below and came shooting upwards. Upon looking down, Qin Mu saw the tips of a dozen swords. Senior Sister Qing's sword handling became progressively stronger by the minute. She wasn't controlling a dozen swords. She had created the illusion of a dozen swords with just one. Qin Mu suddenly recalled Cripple's words. "Don't think about whether or not a foothold will be able to withstand your weight. As long as you're fast enough, even water will be like solid ground. Grass, air, everything will become solid ground." Pushing off with the tips of his toes, Qin Mu leaped forward. The sword lights burst into the sky, shredding the top of the huge tree he had perched in. 2 youths leaped up and landed among the treetops just in time to see Qin Mu striding through the tips of the trees, dashing away like a flowing wind. They could only stare blankly, astonished by Qin Mu's speed. "Why is he so fast?" one of them asked. "That kid is younger than us, but his cultivation seems to be slightly stronger ours." As the 2 youths thought about it, they saw their senior brother Q vanish like smoke and begin to chase Qin Mu at an even faster speed. As expected of senior brother Q, he's much more powerful than we are, having reached the pinnacle of the spirit embryo. Both of them sighed in admiration. With senior brother Q personally going after him, there's no way that little devil will be able to escape. At this exact moment, a dark shadow suddenly materialized in the forest. A hairy palm the size of a woven mat came hurtling towards Senior Brother Q, slapping him as he dashed through the air. Senior Brother Q flew backward, spinning uncontrollably and crashing to the ground. He tumbled for a short distance before coming to a stop, coughing up a mouthful of blood as he tried to sit up. "Don't go over there! There's a devil ape! That's the territory of a devil ape!" The other four youths immediately stopped in their tracks. As the shadow emerged from the trees, they saw that it was a huge, terrifying black gorilla. Its eyes were a deep red, and its fangs protruded from its mouth. Beating its chest like a drum, it bellowed, "Die, young'un!" Qin Mu, who had run ahead earlier, had also been struck from the air by this devil ape. He was currently lying at the devil ape's feet, unmoving. The youths couldn't tell if he was dead. Staring at Qin Mu intently, Senior Sister Qing mumbled, "Since one palm strike from that devil ape heavily injured Senior Brother Q, and that little devil also received the same hit, he should be dead, right?" Before she could finish speaking, she jumped in surprise. Qin Mu, who was lying on the ground in front of the devil ape, had tilted his head slightly to ascertain the situation. "That kid isn't dead yet?" she said in disbelief. The pitch-black devil ape roared a few times, then stopped when it saw that the rest of the youths didn't dare to step forward. Then it looked down at Qin Mu, slipping his body over with 2 fingers. "Young'un, die." Seeing Qin Mu's wide-open eyes bleeding from his entire face, and even the tongue which was sticking out, it was clear he could not be any more dead. Snorting in satisfaction, the devil ape threw Qin Mu's body aside. It then sat down and started picking leaves from a nearby tree, eating them. Even though it's so fierce, the devil ape is actually a herbivore. Qin Mu continued to bleed from his face, keeping his eyes wide open as he slowly crawled away using his elbows. All of a sudden, the devil ape turned its head to look at Qin Mu's body, which had gone limp again. As it continued to glare at Qin Mu's body, it remained motionless. Stretching out its finger and poking what it thought of as a corpse, the ape discovered that Qin Mu's body had already become icy and hard. "Young'un, die," it said with renewed satisfaction, then turned back and focused on eating tree leaves without a care. Witnessing all of this from a distance, Senior Sister Qing could no longer help herself. "Hey, big fella, don't you find it weird that the young'un corpse became so cold and hard so quickly?" Seemingly able to understand her, the devil ape slapped its forehead and immediately turned around. The young'un corpse, however, had already gotten up and started to frantically flee. That wraps up the content for today's episode. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel to get notifications for the next episode. For now, goodbye, and see you next time.